Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert in the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. I'm so pleased to be welcoming Rina to the show today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, you guys aren't going to want to miss this. If we haven't met before, my name's Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive, and I help protect people from the pain of damaged relationships. So if you ever want to discuss that, I would love to connect. But today we're going to be speaking with Rina, and you guys won't want to miss out on this. You want to capitalize on her knowledge and brilliance. So please do feel free to use those comments, ask your questions, whatever you would like to know. Even if you're watching this and it's no longer live, feel free to put those questions in the comments and we can make sure to get back to you. So to start out, I always love for our audience to know a little bit about you and how you became to be a mental fitness coach.
My story is a little interesting. I I'm going to make this a really long story really short. I worked for other people for a really long time. In fact, I was doing credit and collections. And I knew that I had to be doing something that was bigger and better than me, but I had no idea what it was. So I quit my job and uh, tried to figure out what it was that I wanted to be when I grew up. So in 2012, I was recruited by New York Life and worked for them for 2 years. And during those 2 years, I hired two different business coaches. And both of those coaches offered wonderful insight and advice. But what I found was that it wasn't getting to the root cause of why I didn't want to pick up the phone and make cold calls or why I didn't like networking. And I started doing some research after I left New York Life. I started doing some research about how we operate as humans. And I learned a lot about the subconscious and I learned about core coping mechanisms and I learned about ACEs. And if you're not familiar with ACEs, it is adverse childhood experiences. And I had taken that test and my score was a 4, which seems kind of low. But if you're familiar with that test, it says if you score 1 to 3, then essentially you're good. But if you score 4 or more, then you've had what's considered an adverse childhood. And so I started getting certifications in neurolinguistic programming, cognitive behavioral therapy, confidence, entrepreneurial things, and just continued to dive deep into positive psychology and everything to do with the brain. And I have a business degree from a co-college here where I live, and everything that I have learned about entrepreneurship, confidence, and the subconscious is actually has been more benefit to me than my business degree has. So that's how I became a mental fitness coach and talked a lot about resiliency the last couple of years. And just really am adamant about using the being experience informed, which I know we're going to get into a little bit, over anything else because we all have experiences.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. And I like maybe for this audience, because I know a lot of them are business owners. I think a lot of people start out with, why aren't I making cold calls? Why aren't I networking? I know I should do these things for my business, and there's a lot of overwhelm. So
Yes.
I think that's a piece that people can probably start relating to. But we are going to dive a little bit into, this idea of trauma informed versus experience informed. And,
Yeah.
the ACEs, for example, are very trauma informed. They're really looking at adverse childhood experiences are essentially they're qualifying as trauma.
Yes.
Now, why do you think that kind of trauma language or calling things trauma informed is a bit hard for some people to hear?
To be very blunt and frank about it, because a lot of people are in denial about their trauma experiences, or they don't recognize that what they experienced is classified as trauma. I was one of those people. I never would have guessed that I would have scored a 4. I wouldn't have guessed that the way I grew up was considered a traumatic experience to a certain degree. And I want to be very clear. There are varying degrees of trauma. And I think that a lot of people take the worst case scenario and classify only that as trauma. And so when we talk about being a trauma informed community or a trauma informed workplace or a trauma informed school, there are a lot of people that can't relate to that because in their minds, they have not experienced that worst case scenario. So they're not going to relate to that in any capacity.
With that too, there can be this automatic judgment of others. If someone says,
Totally.
I experienced trauma, oh, well, that doesn't sound like trauma to me.
Right.
And yeah.
And there's also that other aspect of I'm not going to adjust my ways to accommodate your trauma because I can't relate to your trauma.
Yeah. That's a really good point as well, is the idea behind trauma informed is how you work with other people who have experienced these adverse things. And if people can't see that, don't want to acknowledge it, that would be really tough.
It would be tough. And I think that the work that the community that is advocating for being trauma informed is doing is amazing and life changing for a lot of people. But there's a lot of people that it's not connecting with, and that's where experience informed comes in. And I'm fairly certain I'm the one that has coined this term. I have not heard it anywhere else. So what experience informed to me is that we have all experienced life. Everything that we have ever been a part of, witnessed, heard about, doesn't matter. That is an experience, and it helps us to, those experiences have helped us to form our core coping mechanisms. And because of those experiences and those core coping mechanisms, we now relate in the world in X, Y, and Z way. And as we're building business, as we, the owners of our businesses, are trying to get new customers or figure out marketing or go to networking groups, whatever it is that we're trying to do, all of those experiences and core coping mechanisms are playing a role. And so it's hard to deny that we've had these experiences. So therefore, let's work on them.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And one thing I love too, which is maybe another layer on it, is because we have these ideas of what trauma is, like certain specific events or situations, trauma is really just the inability to cope with a situation. You don't have the resources and resilience to cope with a situation. So something that might be disregarded by a lot of people, and you might even be going like, this is stupid that I am affected by this. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't mean that it's not this experience. So that I love that language opens this up to a whole realm of, it doesn't matter what it was your experience. It happened to you and it affected you.
Yes. And it may have been traumatic. It may not have been traumatic. Like there was, actually, I think I'm going to wait and not share that story right now. So let's,
right.
We'll come back to that. The other thing that I would like to share to that is that, yes, we can relate more to, hey, you had this experience. What happened? How did that affect you? The other thing is, as a person who also talks a lot about resiliency and being resilient, there's this idea, in fact, let me ask you, what is your definition of resilient?
The ability to cope with the challenges that you have in your life on a very basic level.
Okay. I love that. Not at all what I was expecting you to say. Most people say it's the ability to bounce back after an event. And the idea that we're going to be the same person that we were prior to that event is preposterous to me. We cannot be. It's like we cut off a part of the statue and then we try and put it back on, and we can't do that. So my definition of resilience is very similar to yours. It's the ability to cope with the mental stresses of an event while dealing with that event.
I like that. It's an interesting idea, and I have some problems personally, which you might as well, with this idea of like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and this expectation that if you're tough, you should be able to get through all the adversity and come out more champion on the top and just feeling perfect. And giving people the space to acknowledge that I actually do believe you can eventually get to that higher point. But it's not to say that you should just zip through all of your problems and automatically feel that way. It's going to probably take some work and some processing to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, the amount of work that we have to put into a thing is different for everybody. And while that adage, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is I don't like it. There is a tiny bit of truth in there, is in that every day up to this point in our lives, we have survived everything that we have gone through.
Yeah. I'm curious, and maybe this is getting a little too off topic as well, but because we're talking about resiliency, one of the pieces that I think as a society we're facing a bit as a epidemic right now is people not knowing how to foster resiliency. There's a lot of small factors that tear away from that, the way we might not have good community support, the way we might use technology as a coping mechanism, which doesn't build some of those building blocks that help us. Do you see that as a challenge right now too, that people are having a hard time even building that sense of resiliency?
Yes and no. So we all have to figure out what our coping mechanisms are, and as technology increases, we're definitely going to take advantage of those to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And our ability to recognize that as a disassociative process rather than an actual coping mechanism is golden. And when I work with clients, I'm not if they want to reduce screen time or reduce distractions, then we work on that. But more specifically with my clients, I work on that subconscious piece, because the subconscious, there's a beautiful quote by Carl Jung that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And while learning all of these things about the brain and our subconscious, one of the things I learned is that 95% of 95%. And people are going to be like, nah, I'm thinking about things all the time. My brain doesn't stop. And yes, that's true. My brain also doesn't stop. But when we get in a car, we drive to work or home or parents' house or wherever, there's this subconscious thing that just takes over and we drive automatically.
Yeah.
And our brain does that because if we have to constantly think about all of the things that we have going on in our lives, we would go insane. So while driving the car is a easy, relatable situation, our brain does the same thing when we smell a certain cologne. It says, okay, I have experienced this before, and depending on whether or not that experience was good or bad, I'm going to react in this way. So when we smell a cologne, when somebody looks like somebody else, I mean, how many times have we said, oh, I don't like that person, they remind me of my ex? So these are all ways in which our subconscious really is taking over for us in order for us to minimize the conscious impact that those events have on us. So as business owners, when we're dealing with clients or employees, that situation is no different. That person, we may or may not like that customer because he or she reminds us of our second grade school teacher. And we didn't like that person, or they were extra mean to us, or whatever the reason was. So all of these experiences that we have in life really do impact everything that we do. Okay, so now I'm going to share that story that I wanted to come back to.
Please do.
So I was seeing somebody, and he was coming to my house for the weekend, and I wanted to make him breakfast. And I said, do you like pancakes? I make amazing pancakes. And he said, according to me, I make amazing pancakes. And he said, I do, but will you get real maple syrup? And I was like, sure, which was very confusing to me because he lived on a farm. He was not the type of person that I perceived would want or like real maple syrup. But it was early in us seeing each other, and I wanted to impress him. And so I went to the store and I scanned the shelves for the perfect bottle of real maple syrup, which I have no idea what that is. And the whole time I was so confused, but I never once questioned his request. I was like, "Oh, you want real maple syrup? Okay." So I bought the syrup. He came to my house. I made the pancakes. He ate the pancakes and never said a word, not one word. He didn't say, "Ooh, this is really good," or "This is really bad." Like, not, he said nothing. So we need feedback, right? We were talking just a little bit ago about being able to see each other's faces while we're talking. We
Yeah.
need feedback. I got no feedback. I was like, okay, whatever. So I let it go. And then fast forward a couple weeks, I go to his house and he made pancakes for me. And out of his kitchen cupboard, he pulls a bottle of Hungry Jack. And I was like, now I have all of the questions. Please help me understand. You asked me to get real maple syrup. And he said, this is real maple syrup. And I said, what? And he said, when you grow up so poor that you use corn syrup, and not even the brand name of corn syrup, but the knockoff corn syrup, the generic corn syrup, this is real maple syrup. My mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been talking about adverse childhood experiences and being trauma informed. And I'm fairly certain that that was the moment that I was like, oh, we need to be talking about experiences. Because experiences define everything. They define literal definitions of words such as real maple syrup. I never would have put those things together ever.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic story. And based on what you've been saying, is the starting point then of this trying to look at your childhood and your past for the experiences, or is it addressing the subconscious first and figuring out what it is you're putting out and then working your way back?
Oh, that nobody has ever asked me that question before. I think that is a little bit of chicken and egg, because the experiences determine how our subconscious is going to interpret and store those memories. And then our subconscious is the thing that's going to affect us now as adults. So I'm going to say both. I can't do one without the other.
Yeah. So I'm thinking in the context of either someone working with you or someone listening to this right now that's like, okay, I'm hearing it. My subconscious is doing something 95% of the time I'm maybe not aware of.
Yeah.
I maybe haven't classified my childhood as traumatic, but thinking about it, there's probably something.
Right.
How do they start? Do you have some tips for people?
Yeah. The first tip is to start questioning everything you ever thought to be true about yourself. When we have reactions to things, it is because we are, and I know some people have a hard time with this word, but we do get triggered, and those reactions are very natural, and it is because of our subconscious. So if we have the ability to take just a hot second and say, why am I so bothered by this? And that's where the ego comes in, and the ego wants to destroy the other person because the ego needs an us versus them in order to survive. And so it's a real halt to how our ego naturally operates. And when we have the ability to take a step back and say, why am I truly bothered by this? What is really going on here? It may not happen for a couple of months before you can truly figure that out. But at least in that moment, you give yourself the space and the other person or the situation, the space that's needed in order to have a different kind of reaction to stop the neural transmitters from firing in the way that they're so used to firing because of our subconscious. That's the very first step. So that conscious decision to be like, whoa, what am I doing here? What's happening right now? And then the second, conscious decision to alter that reaction or process. And that can be anything in any situation. Only that person can decide what that conscious new reaction should be. But knowing that that's what needs to happen first, and then being willing to do it. Because so here's a whole nother subset of this work. There is a benefit for us in everything that we do. There's a benefit for us to not have the kind of money that we say we want to have. There's a benefit for us to continue the drama within those relationships that we have. And that benefit could be something as simple as a connection with a parent, or a way to connect with friends. If we don't have the complaints about our spouse, then what am I going to talk about with my friends? That kind of benefit is what I'm referring to. There's no surface level benefit to having constant fights with your spouse or not having any money, right? That surface level benefit is definitely not there. But if you dig a little deeper, there is that underlying secondary benefit that we do enjoy, do experience.
I couldn't agree with you more. I use needs-based language. We're always looking to meet unmet needs. And if you can't be aware of those the same way that you're helping people be aware of that benefit, you're just going to keep doing the unconscious way of meeting that need, even if it's not a good thing. And, working in addictions and mental health for years, you see a lot of that, right? Because
Yes.
addictions are obviously a solution to people. They're the best things
Absolutely.
they have at the time to meet a need.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, or I guess one point I wanted to put out there as well is because you're talking about, triggering, and that's easy to see, if you're fighting with your spouse and you notice the same pattern always happens and you're yelling at each other. The example again that you brought up at the beginning of, oh, I just don't want to make those cold calls, isn't necessarily a big event, right? People are probably not sitting there freaking out about making a cold call. They're just going, I'm not going to do it today. I don't need to do. I'll do that tomorrow, right? Are there things, or do you have any suggestions for helping people also spot maybe those more subtle mindsets that are happening, or subtle ways that they're playing out the subconscious?
Sort of. People aren't going to like it though.
I love it. Let's go.
Make the first one. Do the first thing, whatever it is that you don't want to do. Our brain really does enjoy having the ability to make decisions. Like, we as humans need that autonomy and give us a choice. And if we're in a position in which we feel like we have to do these things, then we're going to fight it even more. So if it is a situation similar to making cold calls, then set a number, dial 5 numbers. Doesn't matter what happened. They don't answer, they answer, whatever. A lot of people will say, go for the no, like get 10 no's. Just make 5 phone calls, right? Or if you have to clean your office and you really don't want to, set a timer for 20 minutes. And at the end of those things, then you get to decide, do I want to keep going? Or do I feel accomplished enough for today?
Yeah.
And start taking back that choice, that decision that only you can make for yourself and your success.
I love it. And this show is about mindset, but ultimately all mindset is about what actions you are going to take in the world after it. It's no good to just think things. You've got to change your mindset to then take action on the things you want. So I actually like calling out people and saying, you got to start. That's the first point, or you're never going to get to the point that you want.
It is. And we talk about that so much. We talk about just doing it. And then there are people that are like, but I can't. And that's true. That's also an entirely different podcast that we don't have time for today. But there's this ability to, you can beat yourself up for it, or you can accept where you are for that day, that week, that month, and acknowledge, I have to be okay. I am okay with this. or I'm not. The beating of self is the part that really needs to stop, because that's just not serving anybody's purpose.
Yeah. And to me, that's really one of those, childhood or patterns that we have is so many messages are, the shoulds. And it's a way that I think a lot of people inspire themselves is, oh, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to beat myself up until I should do it.
Right.
And
right.
That's that external motivation. It's not going to hold you. It's not going to serve you in the long run.
Yeah. About 6 months ago, I decided that I was going to stop hustling for business, that all of my business is going to come to me by word of mouth. I'll do some social media post when I feel like it. But outside of that, I am not hustling for business. And it has been so freeing. And the number of opportunities that have come my way since then, like our connection for today, if I had gone seeking, it would have been frustrated by the time you and I did, right? But everything just comes much easier. There is one final piece of advice that I would give to people.
Please.
And everybody talks about gratitude. And they talk about gratitude because it really is the easiest, quickest way to keep your mindset, start seeing the good and the opportunities that are coming your way by forcing your brain to look backwards. Here's the other problem. So I have a problem with the way people do things, apparently. So the problem that I have with gratitude in that sense is that everybody talks about doing it externally. What good things happen? What did you hit all the green lights? Whatever the case may be, it's all external. And so when I talk to clients about doing a gratitude journal, I absolutely asked them to do that. But I asked them to do that about themselves. So internal validation. What is it that you did well? Did you have a great hair day that day? Great. Write that down, because some days that's all we can muster, right? But every single day, a minimum of one thing written down about ourselves, because we are our worst critic. And if we want the success, or we want to truly believe that we can do the things that we are meant to do, then we have to be able to see all of the amazing things that we have already done. So that's the other final piece of advice that I would give to people is start appreciating yourself and write down your awesomeness.
I absolutely love that. I hope everyone who's watching takes that with them and goes and implements it. I hadn't thought of that before with gratitude journals. And, we've had different people talk about gratitude and, law of attraction on the show. And this idea of, you never see a white car and then you buy a white car and you suddenly see white cars. Yep. If you're only doing that to the external world, it's great. You now see your world is better. But I love the idea of, now I'm acknowledging these things inside of myself as better. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah. There's not a single person that is in this line of work that we do that will tell you that you can change your world, or you will be happy by all of the external things in our lives. Not one.
And if they do tell you that, don't go with them. Right. Don't approach with that person.
Right.
Well, amazing. I want to thank you so much for being here. This has been fantastic, just that last point alone, but all of this about how we can be seeing ourselves and exploring that and challenging those experiences and assumptions. If people want to reach out to you, we do have your email in the description. We can put it in the comments as well. If they have questions and stuff, you've been so generous with your knowledge and wisdom. So I'd certainly encourage people to connect with Rina.
Yes,
and
please.
I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing. And I can't wait to have you on my show in a couple of weeks.
I know. I'm very excited about that as well. Thank you all for tuning in. We will see you next week. And remember, every thought counts.